Sarah here, and today I'm talking about the hardest things about moving to Paris. Let's go. Have you ever had a roll of tape and you can't find for the life of you that tiny little opening, and then you finally do and it rips and the tiniest little sliver of tape piece comes up and not the whole thing, and then you have to dig around at that one little area hoping that you'll get the tape open? That's kind of what it's like finding information about moving to France from the United States. But I've done it and I'm here to help you. I'm going to be talking about a few of the hardest things about moving to France, and one of them is finding information about all of the hoops you have to jump through to move to France, and it can be frightening. I'm talking about specifically France from the United States. It is frightening even if you pride yourself in your web sleuthing capabilities. I, for one, can find someone's new boyfriend with a first name alone. But details of moving to France, yeah, thank you, next. It was actually quite difficult. So there are some good resources on finding accurate information. The best luck I have had is with people who have done the process before themselves. That's actually what inspired me to create this channel. I have found some through Facebook groups, which a few that I recommend are Women Living in Paris. Really cool community of women. Of course, this is only if you are a woman. Second is applying for a French CDS and or visa. This group is great with visa questions. They do have some strict guidelines, though, to keep the channel tidy, so definitely pay attention to those. And the third is Americans in France. I do really like this channel, and I found a lot of info there. I find that they're a little bit snappy, is maybe the right word, but still, I recommend it. The second most difficult thing about moving to France is actually figuring out your reason for going to France. That might sound a little silly, but I mean on paper. In order to move to France for more than 3 months, as an American, it's all about the visa. And there are a few main types of visas, and then there's types within those types of visas, so it can get a little bit confusing. So the three-ish main types are short stay visa. So this is for a visit to France lasting 3 months or less. You actually don't need this if you're American. You can go for 3 months or less. So if you're thinking about doing this, you can go, which is awesome if you have a valid passport. The second is a temporary long stay visa. So this is for any amount of time under a year, but over 90 days. And then there's long stay visas, which are absolutely required for staying long term. If you're looking to stay for work, for marriage, for studying more than a year, you will need a long stay visa. Now, all of these visas can be for marriage, studying, to be an au pair, a language assistant, to move for work, to move as an entrepreneur, blah, 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 blah. So it really, really depends on what type of visa you're going to get as to how the process is initiated on your side and then approved on the French side. Coming in at number 3, which these are not in order, so I don't know why I said it like it's a podium, woohoo! But it's the paperwork and documents. So there are so many types of visas, like I said, and there are many types of forms that the embassy will need in order to approve or deny your application. And that all depends on, ding, 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 you guessed it, which type of visa you're applying for. So what you'll need to do is literally as much Googling as possible, joining a Facebook group and asking for help, finding people who have done the process before, and triple checking everything, even if organization and attention to detail are your strong suits. Seriously, triple check. Not only that, some forms have to be notarized, and some of them have to be notarized with a certified translation in both French and English and copies. So not only will you need to know what visa you're getting and what documents are required, you'll often and likely need a notary and a certified language translator. The fourth hardest thing about moving to France is getting a damn visa appointment. This should be the easy part, right? You'd think, okay, I have all the paperwork I need, I know what I'm doing, but the appointments to get a visa fill up fast in the US, and sometimes they're booked out for the embassy nearest to you. So you can actually only get a French visa in 9 locations in the USA. So if you're like, oh, I know there's a French embassy in town, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are able to give you a visa to live in France. More often than not, you are going to have to travel to another city for your appointment unless you live in one of those 9 locations. So for example, I live in Arizona and the closest embassy to me is Los Angeles. Well, LA was booked out and I was not finding anything, so I ended up having to take a 3-day trip to Houston to make my appointment with buffer room. That's why I did it for 3 days, and that can happen to you. So definitely make sure that you are looking to see where you can get your visa appointment, and you check every day for an opening. They open really randomly. It'll show there's none available for the next 2 weeks. Then all of a sudden, you'll check 2 hours later, and there will be 50 appointments available, and you got to snatch them up when you can find them. So get that refresh button going, ladies and gents and folks, because you're going to need it. And that leads me to the next one, which is really important. But first, follow, subscribe, and like if you're enjoying this or if you think that you might want to move to France in the near or distant future. The next one, number 4, it's expensive. There are a couple exceptions to this. One, if you're a language assistant and you're in a program like TAPIF, where if you're under the age of, I think it's 35, it might be 30, though I'll double check. If you're under the age of 35 and you speak French, you can teach English abroad for 8 months, and the visa process is relatively simple because actually someone else does it for you. I've done this before. I can talk about it if you're interested. Number 2, you're an au pair or live-in nanny. That's a more simplified visa process as well. Now, the process itself isn't too unattainable as far as expense, and I mean getting any type of visa. But the visa application, it is around $100, but there's so many other fees that it's easy to forget that they're going to come up. So one of those is potential travel to another city, for example, if you need to get your visa at an embassy because there isn't one close by and you're going to have to do an overnight or even a flight to that city. Getting notaries, getting certified language translations. This can be hundreds of dollars depending on what service you use and how many documents you have and how many you need and the type of visa that you're getting. There's also airline tickets. There's overnighting applications and paperwork depending on your timeline. So you got to FedEx something overnight and it might be $80. So it can get really expensive really quickly. Another really expensive part is moving your pets. If you're bringing them, this will be one of your largest costs. I can almost bet on that. I brought 2. I can tell you all about that, but you have to do all of these different things and get all these different signatures, and it's quite pricey. So save money now if you think you're going to move to France. And the last one that I'll talk about today is conditions and medical needs. So if you have any conditions that require specific medications that you need to take daily or at any timeline, you need to make sure that you know how you're going to obtain them when you're in France. Medications for brain conditions like depression or anxiety can be actually a little bit harder to get in France. Another thing that's really important to know is that if you experience any difficulty with mobility, keep in mind that Paris is not the most mobility-friendly country, unfortunately. Many of the buildings are from hundreds of years ago, and elevators cannot even be built into them, and they are not built into them. If you've stayed at hotels in Paris, you'll likely find a different experience because most of those have elevators, so you'll be like, oh, okay, well, the hotel I stay at had an elevator. That's probably most of a norm. No, most living buildings that people live in do not have them. The other thing is there are many cobblestone streets. The sidewalks can be narrow and kind of bumpy and bulky, and it can be really hard to navigate. Even personally, as someone not currently concerned about my own mobility, it can be a concern for other people. So if that's one of your challenges or something that you're going through, feel free to ask any questions and I'll answer them the best that I can. I'm not an expert in conditions and medical needs in Paris, but I do live here, so I might be able to answer your questions. So that's that. Those are a few things that were really difficult about moving to France. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Share your thoughts, share what else you'd like to learn, and thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to follow for the next video about something about living in Paris.